Thank you and good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Applications Committee of Thursday, 27th November 2025. This meeting has been live streamed and will be made available on the Council website for public viewing. And at this juncture, can anyone with mobile phones either please ensure they're switched off or on silent? Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting, writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. If you're in the hall, you can do this on your iPhone or iPad. Please don't repeat contributions already made by other members. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting so we can keep track on whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where a clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. Similar to the process now followed at full council, when considering motions or amendments which are substantive in nature, I will call a recess where necessary so that I may seek governance advice on competency. This is good practice in governance terms and will also provide for governance to be able to collate and circulate the terms of said motion amendment to members in order that they have the opportunity to properly review it. I hope this process makes matters more effective and I seek members' support in implementing this. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. I now ask Clerk Tracy to confirm said and apologies, please.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair. We've got 14 members present in total, 7 members present here in person at Council HQ, being the Chair, the Vice Chair, Councillor John Campbell, Councillor Hislop, Councillor Maureen Johnston, Councillor McFarlane and Councillor Slater. 7 members present on Microsoft Teams, being Councillor Blake, Councillor Drybra, Councillor Giusti, Councillor Jordan, Councillor Lowe, Councillor Marshall and Councillor Thompson. And I have 4 apologies, Councillor Crothers, Councillor Drysdale, Councillor Hill and Councillor Walters. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Andy McFarlane, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Item number, I think it's number six. I was approached by the applicant seeking advice and support in relation to this. I advised them that as a member of this committee it would have been appropriate and directed them to one of my fellow councillors on the ward. Therefore, I feel it's a statement of connection and I am still able to participate in the meeting. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor McFarlane. I don't see any other indication of anyone wanting to make a declaration, so that will conclude the declarations of interest. The only thing I can add to the declaration of interest is that agenda item number 7 in your papers has been withdrawn. So number 7 will not be considered today during the determination period for this committee. We now move on to the minutes of the previous meeting of the 29th of October 2025 for approval. I will take silence as acknowledgement that it's a true minute. Members in the hall have agreed and I don't see any other indication of anyone wanting to speak, so this will be a true record of the meeting of the 29th of October. I will now ask the clerk to take us through or outline the procedure to be followed at the meeting today. So Tracy, if you can take us through the procedure, please.
Thank you, Chair. The Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The Chair has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the period specified in Council policy. No other persons will be allowed to speak. The Chair will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak to make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. The order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee, and such members should withdraw from the meeting after making their presentation, and then applicants or their agents. Representatives were offered the option of attending today's meeting in person or joining remotely through Microsoft Teams. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, except for national and major developments, which by their very nature are more complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. The chair of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the Council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. After all representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session, and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Tracy. We'll now move on to the agenda items for today. So first agenda item is item number 4, an application for the erection and 35-year operation of a wind farm comprising 9 turbines, formation of access tracks, borrow pits, battery storage, temporary construction compound, substation and associated infrastructure at variance with conditions 2 and 13 of Planning Permission 22/0471/S42. A, to allow changes to the ancillary infrastructure out with the consented micrositing allowance, and B, to increase the stated micrositing allowance to 130 metres to facilitate the development of the wind turbines, and C, allow for larger wind turbines of up to 220 metres from base to tip, amended description, at Fell Wind Farm site between Black Craig Wind Farm and Loch Earth, 7 kilometres to the south of Moneyhive. It's a Section 42 application, reference number 25/00822/S42. Recommendation is to approve subject conditions, and the case officer is Robert Duncan. So, Robert, you take us through your report, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just before I start, there's 2 errors within the report. Firstly, if you look at paragraph 1.12 on page 22 of your papers, the intention here, at the foot of that paragraph, the intention here is to vary to allow turbines up to 220 metres from base to tip in height as part of condition 2. I think that's a cut and paste error on my part. There's also a small typo at the end of paragraph 1.12 as well. It says as instead of is, but it's fairly minor. And the other part that I've noticed is on page 41 of your papers, paragraph 4.19, which is the final paragraph of section 4, should be relabelled 4.22. So apologies for that. Moving now to the actual report and the presentation. As per paragraph 1.6 of the report on page 20, this application is made under section 42 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997 as amended, and seeks a new planning permission for the proposed wind farm development, but with 2 different conditions at variance with appeal decision PPA 170-2163, and those conditions are conditions 2 and 13. This application is supported by the information set out in paragraph 1.13 of the report in front of you today on pages 22 to 24. So moving on to the planning history relevant to this proposal, this is in relation to the background of this site. It reflects the information contained within the report at paragraph 1.14. So you've got the original application 2014, which was withdrawn 18th of May 2025, which was about the time of the Amber Rudd announcement when a lot of change happened in the wind farm sector. You then had the 20148 FUL non-determination appeal, which took place, and then more recently than that, you had the Section 42 planning application, which was also the subject of an appeal. There have been recent Section 42 decisions relevant to this proposal, and which were considered by the Planning Applications Committee. So, members, you should note that permission has already been granted under Planning Permission 250647S42, which would enable all turbines to be up to 200 metres high by virtue of a variance to the wording of Condition 2. The decision is also taken in respect of 250539S42 and 250647S42, also allow micrositing allowance of up to 130 metres from the originally approved site plan set out in Condition 2 of Appeal Decision PPA 172163. The other one you've got there, the top of the three that are mentioned there, was effectively a renewal of the previous permission, and that came in front of you in, I think it was May this year, sorry, 30th of April it is. Can't read my own slide there, apologies. So looking at the cumulative situation, this is showing the approved wind farm decisions in the wider locality. The Fell wind farm is towards the bottom of this slide. It maybe doesn't come out too clearly, but it's in the bottom right next to the Blackcraig wind farm. There's quite a lot of wind farm interest in this location, as I'm sure you're aware. Moving on now, this is the site layout which was granted under Appeal Decision PPA 172163. This appeal was submitted to the Scottish Ministers on the basis of non-determination back on the 31st of August 2022. It was determined on the 10th of March 2023 when it was granted subject to conditions. This remains an extant planning permission. Recent decision 250141S42 served to extend the window, if you like, for commencement of the development until the 2nd of November 2029. So there is a fallback position, and the determination made today does not affect that situation because those are separate planning applications. Moving on now, this is the revised layout sought as part of this application. So if approved as per the recommendation, this layout could be agreed as part of a subsequent discharge of conditions application with consultation with SEPA. And my understanding is that this is the layout that the applicant, the developer, wants to go ahead and implement. Scottish Government guidance, I won't go through this, in relation to Section 42 planning applications is now contained within Circular 3 of 2022, and I've summarised that within the report, paragraphs 1.3, 1.4, 1.7, 1.8 and 1.9. So that's in pages 20 and 21, so to really try and give you background in relation to that. So there's now going to follow a series of comparative wireline visualisations, starting with viewpoint 1, and these are this is the situation as approved under Appeal Decision PPA 172163. Viewpoint 1 is looking towards Blackcraig Hill and the wind farm from the U392N public road near Lochar, looking west. So what you have here is the wireline showing what has been approved under the appeal decision, and the next slide is from the same viewpoint, viewpoint 1, showing the proposed revisions now sought, which recommended conditions 2 and 13 would enable. Members should note, and it's in the report, that the developer seeks to delete turbine 3 from this, so you might see that kind of gap arising there. That's mainly due to the deletion of that proposed turbine. You'll also notice slight differences in location and possibly base to tip height, but it's fairly subtle. Looking at viewpoint 2 now, again another wireline visualisation. This viewpoint's from the A712, close to the junction with the C36S public road, so that's near Blackcraig Bungalow, and this is looking to the kind of north-northeast. Blackcraig Wind Farm, although it's not shown in this wireline, would be on the left-hand side here. And viewpoint 2 just shows a comparative wireline from the same viewpoint, giving a comparison with what they are now hoping to implement in terms of a layout and turbine size in comparison with the original appeal decision. Viewpoint 3, this is from the C117S public road near Moneybuoy Bridge, if I've pronounced that correctly, and that's between Corsica and Lochar, looking north-northwest. And you've got the comparative viewpoint, the wireline here from, the same viewpoint. So it shows the kind of difference that would actually be seen out in the field, if you like. Moving now to viewpoint 7, another wireline visualisation. This is from the A702 public road between Moneyve and St John's Town of Dalry. It's near the Lochar junction, close to Shankfoot Bridge. So this is looking towards the southwest, and again it's showing the wireline which would have arisen if the appeal decision was implemented, as could happen, and now basically the development as proposed, the implications of that, showing the layout and the turbine types that they want to implement now. So it shows the comparison there. Next viewpoint is 13, more distant viewpoint. Here it's from the edge of Corsic. It's along the C117S public road, so it's looking towards the north-northwest. So this is a minor road that branches off Corsic just as you leave it in the western part of that village. So that's showing the layout, turbine type as per the appeal decision. And then the next one shows the comparison with what the developer now wishes to implement by virtue of the Section 42 permission and what happens with the conditions. Final viewpoint is 15. It shows a wireline visualisation of the proposed development as approved under the appeal decision. This is from Dalmacallum View, which is in Moniaive, just as you come into it on the eastern side, from Pen Punt on the A702, and this is looking southwest. So a fairly distant view. That's as approved with the appeal decision, and that's as the applicant intends to implement by virtue of this decision if it's granted today. I think what is key is what appears in paragraphs 4.21 and 4.22 of your report on pages 40 and 41. The key issue is the perception of difference in the approved and proposed position, and the fact that the submitted comparative LVIA that forms part of the submission draws a conclusion that the degree of visual change is not significantly adverse in EIA terms. The other thing cropping up, members should note that the previous objection from SEPA, and you've got a summary of their consultation response of the 21st of August 2025 in section 2.2 of your papers, so that's in pages 26, 27 and 28. That has now been superseded by their updated consultation response received on Monday 24th of November, which was obviously after the report was published. So the update is that SEPA now has no objection to the proposed development subject to 4 additional conditions, and I've tried to capture these in the slides. Apologies if it disappears into the background because of the text size. But it should be noted that the previous objection related to the substance of the intended site layout, which would be enabled as a result of this application. So the next slide shows the first additional recommended condition from SEPA. This is lifted from their consultation response that was received on the 24th of November. The next slide shows the wording of the second additional recommended condition, and the third and fourth recommended conditions from SEPA are included here. Now, I have drafted out a version of this which may help and can be introduced if you want to at a later stage, but I'll probably park that until then if that's okay. So summary of main issues as per paragraph 4.19 of the report in front of you on page 41, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions set out, including the proposed varied versions of conditions 2 and 13 set out in the report. The recommended conditions, condition 2 is on page 41 and condition 13 is on page 46. I do have recommendations there in relation to SEPA's position and suggestion of 2 additional conditions, but I can come back to those if you like, Chair, because those are within your gift. I would say that if members are minded to support the recommendation in front of you, it would be open to the applicant to submit an application to discharge conditions 2 and 3 of the resultant planning permission in accordance with their terms, and or submit an appeal to the Scottish Ministers in respect of the decision taken, and or submit a revised section 42 application. But like I've said earlier, the understanding I have from the developer stroke applicant is that they see this as the final opportunity to implement the layout that they want, and they don't propose any further changes. So I would expect them, if you go with the recommendation today, to make an application to discharge those conditions. And for the avoidance of doubt, again, I've been advised that the revised site layout drawing submitted, which includes the proposed deletion of turbine T3, is the layout which the developer intends to implement, and that would accord with the visualisations that you were shown earlier in the presentation. Happy to answer any questions at this stage, Chair. And again, if members are seeking advice in relation to the additional conditions, I've got draft versions of that with me today.
Thanks for your presentation, Robert. And we're open to questions from members. If members have any questions, Councillor Andy McFarlane, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions. One of them was in relation to SEPA, so thank you, Robert, for that update, because that obviously addresses that. On page 26, and it's about some of the objectors, page 26, 2.1F, it talks about a 15% community ownership being established. Is that something that we can do? Is that something that's within our gift? Or is that completely at the behest of the developer? On page 28, 2.3I, it says that there's notwithstanding the information and plans submitted, no consent is hereby granted in respect of forming an access to the wind farm site from the A702. So just a wee bit of clarification on that. Pages 29 and 30, it talks about consent. Sorry, what have I got? With these increments, sorry, it's 3.2E, but it's on page 30. With these incremental section 42 changes have been approved, had they all been part of the original application? So is that something, because I do have a concern, I know you've just said that the developer has said that this should be the last application. However, the fact that they say that doesn't prevent them from coming back again, I understand. And it could be that they come back and change again. Looking at your wireline drawings, I saw a significant change in relation to the height and substance of the turbines. And I would hate for them to come back and increase it again, saying, well, we've already got this height, so can we add another 20 metres? Because obviously local people are a bit upset by that. And I think lastly, page 33, 4.7 and 4.8, we talk about the reporter and some of the conditions that they've got. What is the legal position in relation to their judgment, and does it affect this at all? Thank you, Robert.
Robert, if you've got a note of all of them, please.
I think I've got a note, Chair, but please come back if I'm not answering these questions properly. First of all, at 2.1F, community ownership isn't something that is within the gift of the Planning Applications Committee to consider. That's certainly my understanding of it, which is why the report doesn't look at it as one of the key considerations. 2.3, the point about the site access from the A702 public road. When the application originally came in, the intended site layout did include a new access route from the A702, which was something that had been resisted by the Council's Roads Planning Team Leader on road safety grounds. During the application, the situation was updated. They put in a revised site layout plan. I mean, again, this site layout plan hasn't been approved at this stage because that would fall to be part of the discharge of conditions application if this were to be granted. But they made it clear that their intention was no longer to take that additional access from the A702. So that is not something that is part of the proposal in front of you. It's not something that will be agreed as part of the discharge of conditions in due course if that's the outcome. 3.2.E, this is a planning application made under section 42 of the Act. So it's an application seeking a fresh planning permission with conditions that are at variance with a previous application that already has planning permission. So there's always a fallback position in relation to these cases, in the sense that you've got something to varying degree of varying similarity to what you've got in front of you, because they carry the same conditions. There isn't any kind of guidance on how similar it has to be to the kind of parent application, if you like, though. Each application, each planning application falls to be considered on its own merits, but essentially because of the fallback position, what you're looking at is the degree of variance that you have in front of you compared to the fallback position. Now, if you feel that that is harmful and it's significant and it contravenes the council's policies, then you can refuse that application, but you have to make that judgment call in relation to what the fallback position is, if you like, and that is partly where the difficulty lies. In terms of planning applications, you can't actually prevent someone making a planning application to the council's planning authority, and you can get a lot of these applications. I understand that it can get difficult to track what's happening with them all, or what they're all for, what the practical effects of it would be, but the bottom line is we just have to entertain the applications that are submitted to us as a planning authority, and if we don't, you end up with the risk of getting appeals against non-determination to the Scottish Government. The other points 4.7 and 4.8, the planning appeal decision. I forget what the question was in relation to that, Chair, forgive me.
I'll get Councillor McFarlane to repeat it.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for your responses so far, Robert. It's just that what is the legal position in relation to the reporter's judgments under 4.7 and 4.8?
Robert.
I mean, those are decisions that have translated into planning permissions, and like I was saying in relation to the fallback position, that's what it is. There is a planning permission there that can be implemented now on that basis. And like I say, what you're really looking at here is you're looking at something which represents a very similar approach, but you're looking at, you know, is it now acceptable to have turbines of 220 metres from base to tip height here in a different layout when you've got a fallback position of 200 metre turbines? So I think I've probably covered that point already.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Councillor McFarlane. Oh, one more, okay.
Yeah, I don't want to hog this one, but just one very minor point. They're asking for a variance, micrositing from 100 metres to 130. Does that mean that they have a 15-metre additional variance on top of what they already have, or is it 30 metres making it a 60-metre overall? Thank you.
Robert.
It's just the proposed condition in the report. If I just come back to this and have a look. It basically says that the wind turbines, crane pads and substation compound shall be erected in the position shown in figure 3.1. So that's the same layout that was in front of the reporter at the appeal, unless the planning authority has given written approval for any such variation in consultation with SEPA. So the variation for any of those elements, micrositing, shall not exceed 130 metres in any direction from the position shown on the appeal site layout, basically. The part that's excluded now is the track layout, because some of the tracks would extend more than that micrositing distance away from the original site, but I don't see that as being particularly significant, given that you've got the fallback of the consultation with SEPA to cover things like impact on peat and so on.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor McFarlane. I don't see any other speakers. Councillor Slater, then Councillor Maureen Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just the additional height. Is this mainly that they can get more power from the windmill, or is there other reasons for that? Why they've increased the height of the blades, to the blade tip, I should say?
I'm sure the main reason, and I think it says it in the report, is for additional electricity generation, but I'll ask Robert just to confirm that for you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
That's correct, Chair. I'm just trying to find the part of the report where it says that, but yes, that is part of the motivation, and it does appear somewhere in the report. I just can't put my finger on it just now, but I'll carry on looking, Chair.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Councillor Slater. Councillor Maureen Johnson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mine was a very similar question, actually, because I couldn't find any reference that there was a need demonstrated or evidence shown that there is actually a need to increase the height of these turbines. And where can it be shown that there is a definite need to increase the height of the turbines?
Robert.
Thanks, Chair. I found the relevant part of the report. It's at 1.17, so it's at the foot of page 25, and this has come from the applicant. So what they're saying is, for this application, it has been stated by the applicant that the energy yield and capacity factor of the proposed amended wind farm would increase due to the additional tip height proposed. So that's what the applicant's saying. That has not been interrogated. That has basically been taken as a fairly logical conclusion. If the wind turbine gets bigger, it captures more wind and generates more electricity. But they don't really need to demonstrate, if you like, a need for the planning application. They've made the planning application, and part of their claim is that this will generate more electricity. So that's kind of part of their reasoning for it, rather than a kind of needs-based claim.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you.
No other registered speakers. So there are no registered speakers on my document here. So in session, members. Councillor Archie Driver, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think, in my opinion, there's nothing that we can do to not approve this, so I would go with the recommendations plus the two SEPA, or the SEPA recommendations as well.
Thanks very much, Councillor Driver, and I take it as granted that if we do approve this application, it will include all of the requirements that SEPA have placed on the conditions to be attached. If no alternative views, Tracy, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please?
Mr. Chair, members have agreed to approve the application subject to the conditions in the report, including the SEPA recommendations. Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy. Members, move on to agenda item number 5, an application with formation of vehicular access onto C36S public road opposite Halfmark Road End, and formation of associated access track at land at Garcrogo Hill, Corsock, Castle Douglas. This is a full application, reference number 25/1373/full. Recommendations to approve subject conditions, and our case officer is Rob Liburn. So, Rob, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Morning, Chair. So this site is within Garcrogo Forest, and it links some existing forestry tracks to the C36S. And the intention is to provide an alternative access for abnormal loads to the previously consented Fell Wind Farm, which obviously we've just been discussing a related application to that. The proposal is to basically form that connection from the existing forestry tracks to one of the candidates' access points for abnormal load deliveries to Fell Wind Farm that were introduced at the time when it originally came in for planning permission and was granted on appeal. Just moving to, sorry, I've getting ahead of myself slightly. So the next slide obviously will be showing the location within Garcrogo Forest. And following that, we'll have a more detailed site layout plan, which will show on the next slide. Okay, to the top left of the picture is the C36S, and running away to the top of the picture is the road that leads to a dwelling called Halfmark, and that's one of the candidate access points on that earlier appeal decision. So at the bottom of the picture, there are, obviously you'll see there's existing forestry tracks, and the applicant is proposing to upgrade or basically form a new track here. It is like I think you'd call it a forestry ride, where there's a sort of gap between the trees, and I'm not sure if there's ever been a forestry track there in the past that's maybe become overgrown. I don't think so. So this would be, as I say, it'd be a new track. On the next slide, you'll see that they've given us just some engineering details in terms of the proposed track. That's repeated on slide number 4, and again on slide number 5, I think. So just a bit of detail of the proposal. Okay, this slide shows it's basically a context plan, so it's not specifically part of the application. The intention is that access would be taken through existing forestry tracks from Parton, crossing the A712 into Garcrogo Forest, and then using existing forestry tracks. So this particular application is, in essence, a kind of missing link, really, in that particular picture that they've given us. The next slide, please. Contextual image really of Garcrobo Forest taken from the A712. And I don't think you'd particularly be able to see this application site from that perspective. It would be sort of nestled down towards the left of the picture though, where the forestry ends. On the next picture, please. This shows the point where the abnormal deliveries would cross the C36S onto the Half Mark Road and then progressing up at this candidate access point towards the proposed construction of Fell. And the next slide, please. This is looking in the opposite direction. So at the moment it's quite heavily grown. And obviously C36S running left to right there. Next slide. Yeah, this was an earlier photo. So it shows some earlier damage to the road, which I couldn't comment on, but from my last visit, that's been repaired. I'm not sure if that was related to some previous problems in terms of access along here, which I've heard about. The next slide. Looking into the forestry ride, which is really the application site, and it just runs straight away from the picture there. It's quite a tussocky bit of land, really. Okay, sorry, next slide. This is just a wider view from within that parcel of land, so you can get an impression of what the terrain is like. And the next slide. That's looking from the same point down towards Half Mark Road End, which is behind the trees. So it does show that there's a bit of work required to get that track down to there. And the final slide, I think. Just a typical existing forestry track within Garcrobo Forest. That's all I've got to say in this presentation, I think, at the moment. Sorry. And obviously the key points as summarised here in terms of landscape and amenity issues. It wouldn't have a wider landscape impact or no direct amenity impacts from this specific development, and facilitating implementation of Fell. And that's the end of my presentation, I think. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions for our case officer? Councillor Campbell, John Campbell, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Good morning. Thanks for your report, Robert. I was looking on page 62, just at the top there, the formation of access track, which is pending consideration. I'm just wondering what its relation is to the formation of this vehicle access track. Thanks.
Rob?
Yes, so that application is, I think you're referring to 222187 full. And there's been lots of back and forth on that application in terms of supporting information. And that particular proposal would have involved accessing the site, I think, via Balmaclellan, where there's been some difficulties getting the accommodation works in an acceptable way. So it's been indicated to me that this application would probably be withdrawn if the current application is approved, because it would no longer be required. But I mean, that remains to be seen. But this proposal obviously would provide an alternative to that, and would involve less construction works in the forest.
That's been helpful, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Andy McFarlane, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I'm looking at page 60, 1.7, and what it says is there's a minimum of 4.5 metres wide. Do we have a maximum? Because clearly, if it's a minimum 4.5, then there doesn't appear to be any sort of restriction in relation to how wide it could be. And I've certainly had emails from constituents complaining about previous works that they have seen of this kind, whereby it ends up being 25 metres wide, and they have drainage and cabling and all sorts of other things run alongside. And clearly you've seen the photo that you showed us, although you say the road has been repaired, there is a propensity for sometimes of these large vehicles to cause some damage. The other one is on page 63, just fourth paragraph down. It says it should be noted in relation to the road, the Week Rural Road. I'm aware of some wind farm activity up beyond Carsfern, whereby what they've done to reinforce that or to try and improve the stability is putting like metal plates down. And what they do is, the idea is that that should protect it. However, there have been instances where they haven't been secured and significant RTCs have occurred. So what reassurance do we have that they are going to make this a sound surface? Thanks.
Rob, please.
Aye. In terms of the width, the application has referenced, I think on the sections, 4.5 metres minimum. I mean, typically they would be 4.5 metres wide. There might need to be some slight variations in terms of accommodation for bends. I think that's what that reference relates to. Rather than a wholesale change in the specification of the development, and something that might turn out to be not in accordance with the approval. Just a quick look back at the red edge. Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of sort of wriggle room in the red edge that we've provided. I mean, there is some, and there might be some benefit in terms of microsighting, or in terms of you know, a slight variation to accommodate any obstacles that they come across. But I wouldn't expect anything that's significantly different from what's shown on the drawings that have been presented. So that's probably the end of what I can say about that at the moment. I'm sorry, just have to remind me of the second part of your question, please.
Yeah, thank you. It was in relation to page 63, 2.1, the fourth paragraph, and it was talking about it being a characteristically weak rural road, and that should be significant strengthening work should be required. So really just to make sure that they do actually put in the strengthening works and don't simply put down metal plates to cover the work and to make sure that their vehicles can travel, but they actually do the work that's going to strengthen the road. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's something that's would be covered by the sort of the wider permission for the wind farm, and they will need to provide details of further works, and any further works to the public road would obviously need to be agreed first as well. So I think it's out with the scope of this application really, and this particular site obviously ends before we get onto the C36S. So I think that part relates to condition 22 of the earlier permission, and it's something that would need to be dealt with at that time. Yeah, sorry, I'm just checking that's actually the correct condition number, but I'm not sure I've got the same reference to hand. But there is obviously a condition on the earlier permission requiring details of accommodation works. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Councillor McFarlane. Councillor Archer Driver, please.
Thanks, Chair. And just in response to that question by Councillor McFarlane, is this not something that we can do if we agree the application, put it in the conditions that you have a maximum width of road in support with the road traffic management plan?
Thank you. I'll ask Rob and then I'll refer to David, but I would imagine we'd have to be careful that whatever we ask for, it's reasonable. And these engineering works to upgrade the road might encounter some circumstances during the excavation that weren't apparent at the time the works were initiated. But Rob, can you help Councillor Driver, and then I'll come to Mr Sutty after that.
Aye, okay, thank you. Sorry, I think, sorry, I'm spluttering a little bit here. Yeah, so as was alluded to, conditions will need to meet the tests for conditions, and I think given the narrowness of the application site, I'm not sure that it would meet the test of necessity, possibly. There's also the possible difficulties that might be encountered in terms of getting past any obstacles or anything like that. There might be some small unknowns, but the application site is quite curtailed, really, except for maybe at the bottom part. So it may be something that we can require further information and relate back to that in a further condition, possibly.
Thanks, Rob. Mr Sutty, can you just tidy that up for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. Abby, could we maybe go back to slide 29, please? That's the proposed site layout plan. As Rob was saying, that basically it is a very narrow application site within the red line boundary, so that is quite self-limiting. So if you look at the context of the road that exists to the north of the site, you can see it is really, there's not an issue about getting a dual carriageway going in through that site. It is going to be self-limiting within the red line boundary. You're also going to have to allow some variation in scope for going around corners, any solid obstacles that just cannot be moved in terms of, say, rock. So I'm content that there isn't a need for attaching a condition. They're not going to do any works just because of the cost any more than they need to do to actually get the AILs in there. So I'm fairly content that there isn't a need to attach a condition to that effect. But if members are concerned about it, then, as I say, I've been concerned about how it would meet the tests of Circular 4/1998. But if members would be more comfortable with that, or say a directive, making it clear about the details, that would be acceptable.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, David. Are you content with that advice, Councillor Driver? Or do you want
I am. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Driver. That's helpful. Councillor Slater, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wonder if there'll be passing places in this road, if there's traffic going both ways. Also, does Nature Scots get informed about this open land that they tend to take away? Because once you get into deep forest, nothing lives there. So open land is very important for animals not to live. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm presuming the traffic will be one way or one vehicle at a time because it will be managed by the wind farm company, given that it's not a public road. But can you just give Councillor Slater that confidence, Rob, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the the related planning permission for the Fell Wind Farm will include construction, traffic management measures required by condition, and that would address that sort of matter. The number of abnormal deliveries are going to be, quite small, really, in the grand scheme of things. So I think even if there wasn't those management measures, I think the probability would be quite small, and that's something that the applicant will manage when they're carrying out construction works. So I don't think there's been any sort of need identified for passing places. And in terms of Nature Scott, as a local scale development, we're not really able to consult Nature Scott we can try consulting them, but I'm not sure we get any comments because that's their service levels. So we have attached a condition, I believe, in respect of biodiversity enhancement and dealing with the preliminary ecological survey. And I think that's proportionate in this case, given the earlier findings of the ecological survey and the site context. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rob. Thanks, Councillor Slater. I don't see anyone else looking to speak, and we have no registered speakers for this agenda item, so we're in session. Members, Councillor Dryburgh, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think we approve the application subject to the conditions put in place.
Thank you. Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, I'd be happy to second that, but notwithstanding what Mr Sutty said, I appreciate that when they're moving these loads that they have to turn and such like, and there may be physical obstructions that couldn't do. But I'd like to sort of see if we could have some sort of condition that said that the road would be widened no more than absolutely necessary, and that we could monitor that. Is that something that we could do?
I would hope that would be a given, but I'd be happy to have that condition attached if officers think it's appropriate. Mr Sutty.
Thank you, Chair. If you look at the very front of your agenda papers, it sets out the 6 tests of Circular 4 1998, and one of them is, well, there's 2 relevant here. One is it has to be necessary and it needs to be precise. So I think if you're saying it should be no more than absolutely necessary, that isn't precise. If members have real concerns about the width of it, then I think you would have to set a figure that it shouldn't be more than such and such so many metres. But again, we don't have the evidence base to actually say what they actually need. My view is that it's self-limiting by the constraints of the red line boundaries. I don't know if you wish to take legal advice on that one as well, Chair, but my advice would not be to attach such a condition. You could have a directive, no problem with directives because they're not enforceable, just saying something exactly like that, that it should not be any wider than necessary.
I would hope Councillor McFarlane would agree. I'll ask our legal advisor, Louis. Louis, do you have any advice on the way forward in this respect, please?
Thanks, Chair. I would just agree with the advice of the planning officer. I think any condition should obviously meet the test of the circular, and it is limited by the red line boundary, and it would be enforceable as a planning matter if the development occurred beyond the red line boundary.
Thanks, Louis. So what do you think, Andy? Happy with a directive? No more than 10 metres unless absolutely necessary, or whatever that might be, as a directive?
Yeah, I would be happy with that. Thank you, Chair.
That sounds reasonable to everybody, and I don't see anyone looking to put a contrary move forward to refuse this application. We'll agree it with a directive being attached that the road width must be no more than 10 metres unless absolutely necessary. Tracy, can you confirm the decision, please?
Thank you, Chair. Members have agreed to approve the application subject to the conditions detailed within the report, and also agreed to attach a directive with the access track being no more than 10 metres as absolutely necessary. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. Thanks, members. Move on to agenda item number 6. An application of the change of use of former police station to form drop-in centre, flatted dwelling for use as supported living accommodation, holiday letting accommodation and 4 workshops, class 4, and alterations including installation and replacement windows and doors, blocking up of and formation of window openings, installation of roof-mounted solar panels and air source heat pumps, and ground-mounted air source heat pump and associated works at former police station High Street, Kirkcudbright. This is a full application, reference number 25/15842 full, and the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. Our case officer is David Herr. David, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. So what we have for us is, as the Chair has described, is a planning application for the change of use of the former police station in High Street, Kirkcudbright, to form a drop-in centre, a flatted dwelling for use as supported living accommodation, a holiday letting accommodation unit and 4 workshops, with various external alterations to facilitate these, this change of use, including the installation of replacement windows and doors, blocking up and formation of windows openings, roof-mounted solar panels and air source heat pumps, and various other assorted works. The site itself falls within Kirkcudbright Conservation Area. It's understood that the police buildings were vacated in 2020, so have lay vacant since then. To tell you a bit more about the proposals, the drop-in centre is intended for use as a safe social space for young people with autism, and is intended to promote mental health and reduce social isolation. The flat above is for 4 young individuals, again with autism, and this is to provide a degree of independence to the occupants of said flat. The holiday accommodation, which would be located within the former cell block extension at the rear of the main police station building, is intended to provide an income to the charity that is running the drop-in centre, and indeed is the applicant. With the workshops proposed within the garage spaces to the rear, intended to provide, again, for those with autism, space for crafts or micro businesses. And finally, there is a computer room located within the former morgue or mortuary. So you can see from the site location plan here, the site is outlined in red. You've got the police station, which fronts onto High Street. It's just next to the Sheriff Court. You've got a vehicular access, which is taken from Castle Street, and that takes you into the rear courtyard, where you would find the garages and the former mortuary. This is the proposed block plan, and again, this is just intended to show the layout of the site as it is intended. So you can see that parking is to be provided in front of the proposed workshop spaces and adjacent to the holiday accommodation unit. This is the existing elevations of all buildings. Apologies, this slide should perhaps have been split in 2 to make this a little clearer as to what the existing situation is with the police station's main building and its ancillary buildings. But certainly, you can see that this is the current situation. In particular, I would draw your attention to the block of garages and the former mortuary. You can see at this juncture that these are flat-roofed buildings. Moving on to proposed elevations of the drop-in centre, the flat and the holiday unit, there are some minor alterations proposed. So, for example, they are proposing to replace windows all round with PVC sash and case. There is the blocking up of 1 window opening at first floor level, and there is the formation of 3 smaller windows at ground floor level on the eastern elevation of the building. To note, these windows that are being formed are for toilet facilities within the drop-in centre. You can also see coloured doors. So there's the blue door to the front elevation facing onto High Street, and again there's a blue door proposed onto the western elevation of the building. These both afford access into the drop-in centre, whereas the red door shown is affording access into the holiday accommodation unit. and you can see from the rear elevation there is a olive green door which will afford access into the flatted development above. Moving on to proposed elevations of the proposed computer room and workshops. The reason I have drawn this to your attention is that these buildings would no longer be flat roofed. Instead, they would have a standing seam zinc roof which is pitched, and onto the roof of the workshop buildings you can see that solar panels are proposed. Additionally, to the external walls of the buildings here, there is an intention to attach or to install insulation, an external insulation system. Moving on to the proposed floor plans. So to the left-hand side of the slide, you have the ground floor plan, which shows the main police building. This layout now shows you how the drop-in centre is going to be laid out. You can see there as well that there is the access into the flatted dwelling via the staircase, and the rear cell block holiday accommodation unit is self-contained within that small unit there. At first floor level, you then see the layout of the proposed flatted dwelling. So it's a 4-bed flatted dwelling intended for use by 4 individuals, again, like we said, with autism. And then towards the right-hand side of the slide, you have 4 workshop spaces and a small toilet and kitchen facility within the former garage block, and a computer room with associated plant and toilet for powering the likes of the air source heat pump and such like. You can see from the workshop layout that the layout is largely constrained by the size or the dimensions of the garages themselves. So they are relatively small units, which perhaps lend themselves well to the intended use that the applicant has for them. Moving on to the photographs, and this is the view taken from High Street towards the former police station. To the left-hand side you've got the Sheriff Court, and on to the right-hand side you have residential properties. You'll see running up the left-hand side of the former police station that there is an access road which takes you to a church beyond. This photo shows the view from Castle Street towards the vehicular access, which takes you into the rear yard behind the former police station and into where the former garages and mortuary are. If you look through the centre of that photograph, you've got a direct view of the former cell block, which would become the holiday accommodation unit. This photo is taken from within the yard towards the former police station building. And again, it's giving you a clear view of the holiday accommodation unit that's proposed, but also a partial view of the drop-in centre stroke flatted development within the main police building. This is taken from the southeast within the yard towards the garages and the former morgue or mortuary. So you can see that these buildings are perhaps not in the best of repair. They're quite utilitarian in their design. They don't offer anything to the conservation area per se, but this is the proposed location of the workshop spaces and the computer room. You can see as well that there is parking being utilised in front of these units. That is largely where the parking would go to serve these units, so it's probably a fair reflection of what's going on there. This again is a view from the northeast within the yard back towards the former police station, just to give you a full idea of the location of the building and indeed the holiday accommodation unit is proposed in relation to the Sheriff Court, which you can see in the top right hand corner of the photograph, but also to residential properties to the left. Another view towards the former garages, these would be the workshops. So the workshop spaces would be the 4 garages to the right hand side of the photograph. with the final garage on the left being converted into the kitchen and toilet space. And finally, this is a view from the west within the yard back towards the vehicular access out onto Castle Street. Again, that gives you an idea of the context of the site, where the site is accessible from in terms of bringing in vehicles. The key issues with this application, proposals would secure the long-term future of a vacant unlisted building within Kirkcudbright Conservation Area, represents the brownfield redevelopment of the site, which would be beneficial to certainly the conservation area, and would lessen the impact that the development has on listed buildings nearby by way of its deteriorating condition. As I've said, it has lay vacant for 5 years. In terms of the proposed uses, the application cannot be restricted to those with autism by the planning service. It wouldn't be appropriate to do so, it wouldn't be competent to do so. So the application's been considered more generally, to determine would it be acceptable to other users, not just those that would be with autism or other needs. And it has been concluded that these uses are compatible with surrounding development, bearing in mind the former use of the building as a police station. The potential impacts of this development can be mitigated by way of conditions. So there have been concerns raised about residential amenity in terms of overlooking and such like. These can be dealt with. There's no objections from consultees, and as such, members are respectfully requested to approve this application subject to the conditions listed in the report. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. So we come to questions for our case officer from members. So Councillor Slater first, please.
Yes, thank you very much for your report. It's regarding page 78, 3.3. There's, it says other matters such as queries over land ownership. Could maybe clarify that? Thank you.
David, please.
Through you, Chair. Yes, there have been queries about land ownership, and this has been raised in more than one of the representations received to the application. Now, these queries relate to whether or not indeed the applicant owns all of the land to which the application relates, and this has been queried with the applicant. First of all, it's important to note that actually the applicant does not own the application site at this time, but they have done formal notification as per the requirements to the owner, which is Police Scotland, and clarification has been provided from Police Scotland by way of title deeds that suggest that while owners of the residential properties nearby have right of access and right of servitude, they do not have any ownership rights. I hope that satisfies your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, David.
No, I still think that you suggest that's a word that's quite widely used, but there's no guarantee of what you're saying. It doesn't appear to be a guarantee of what you're saying about the ownership. Thank you.
David.
Land ownership is not a material planning consideration. So whether or not the applicant owns the land is it's not a determining issue in a planning application. However, I appreciate that it would have impacts on the implementation of said permission. So, for example, a planning permission doesn't carry with it all the permissions you may or may not need. You may still require a building warrant, a road opening permit, or indeed the permission of other landowners. It has been made clear to us, though, as part of the assessment of this application and in clarifying the ownership situation, that Police Scotland own all of the site to which this application relates, and that this would be transferred to the applicant upon conclusion of this planning application. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Thanks, David. Councillor Kim Lowe, please.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. My question is about the parking and the garages. I think the use of the workshops as workshops is a great idea. Are they currently in use by anybody in terms of taking cars in, or are they simply car parking places, I presume, for residents for the cars that are parked in front? Given that it is an area of street parking, was that part of the consultation with residents?
David, please.
Through you, Chair. In terms of the current parking situation, it is acknowledged that at the moment residents are indeed using spaces within the yard to park their vehicles, and that has come through quite clearly in some of the representations received, which is also, I suppose, linked to the land ownership queries. However, the road service were consulted on this application, and while they note that there's going to be displacement of parking, and while they note that on-street parking is oversubscribed in the immediate locale of the application site, they have also noted that there are public car parks within 500 metres of the application site, and on that basis, the road service did not object. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Kim. I don't see. We'll have Councillor Andy McFarlane, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it's probably more of a comment than a question. But as David's picked up, many of the comments that we've had in relation to objections are very supportive of this planning application. However, they've got personal interest in relation to parking and in relation to use of a garden space, which we didn't see photos of. And it seems that the general feeling within the community is it's supportive. However, they're looking for some personal accommodation. But bottom line is the land belongs to Police Scotland, and it's they've been able to exploit an opportunity which may no longer be afforded to them.
And is it an observation, Andy? You don't need a response. No, that's fine. Thank you. Okay, in that case, if we're finished with questions for our case officer, we have two registered speakers. We have Zoe Attridge, who's an objector in person. Is Zoe with us, or is she online? Zoe, are you able to log in, please? I don't see Zoe in the list of folk that are logged into Teams. We'll give Zoe a minute or two before we move on. Zoe is now with us. No yet? No. Okay. We'll have one more delay, and if we can't find Zoe, we'll have to move on. Can somebody try and contact her? No, got a contact number. It'd be a kilter that way, wouldn't it? We have two options, members. We can move on, or we can put this to the back of the agenda, but that an inconvenience is the other members of the public that are here to address the committee on the agenda item. I think we'll just have to move on if Zoe can't join in Teams. Councillor Hislop.
Is the other registered speaker an objector as well, or is that the applicant? Maybe we could accommodate it that way, and if they're not online by the time we get to the next
the other speaker is an applicant, but we've got to be reasonable in this. Applicant's been told to be here for a given time. We'll see if we can find Zoe. So Zoe hasn't been able to get online, and Zoe's no answering the telephone, so I think in this situation we'll just move on. Unfortunately, Zoe had the opportunity and she is registered to be here in person, and that hasn't happened, so we'll move on. So the next registered speaker is Mrs. Phillips, who's the applicant, and I think Mrs. Phillips maybe chose just to be here rather than make a presentation, but you have 3 minutes if you want to make a presentation. Mrs. Phillips.
Hi, hello everyone. I haven't actually got a presentation. I just wanted to be here in case anyone had any questions that needed answering.
That's very kind of you. Okay, so we've had our case officer, we've had the summary, the applicant's here to answer any questions we have. Do any members have any questions for the applicant? It seems not. Therefore, thank you very much for coming forward. You can resume your seat.
Thank you.
Members, we're in session. Councillor Dryburgh, please.
Agree the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any alternative views? Councillor Lowe.
Just a second, Councillor Dryburgh.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. There are no alternative views, so you can confirm the decision of the committee, please, Tracy.
Chair, members have agreed to approve the application subject to the conditions detailed in the report.
Thank you, Tracy. I'll remind members agenda item 7 has been withdrawn. We now go to the application not eligible for public speaking. And the first is agenda item 8. This is a consultation from Scottish ministers regarding an application made under section 36 of the Electricity Act 1989 for a wind farm with up to 12 wind turbines, 6 with a maximum tip height of 220 metres and 6 with a maximum tip height of 200 metres, and associated infrastructure including 21 kilometres upgraded and 10.5 kilometres new access tracks, widened access and parking area at the junction with the A701, permanent meteorological mast, control building, substation compound, temporary construction compounds, up to 3 borrow pits, forestry felling and environmental measures, peatland restoration, habitat improvement and native woodland planting, land to north-east of Dalswinton Wind Farm and to west and northwest of A Village. Proposed Hairstains West Wind Farm, approximately 15 kilometres north of Dumfries. This is a section 36 consultation. Recommendation is to raise an objection, and case officer is Neil Simpson. So I see you there, Neil. Will you take us through your presentation, please?
Good morning, Chair. Thank you for that introduction. Yes, this application has been submitted under Section 36 of the Electricity Act 1989, as the proposed development would exceed 50 megawatts of generation. Just to remind members, under Section 36, the application falls to be considered by the Scottish ministers and not the local planning authority. The formal deadline for the consultation response was extended until 28th of November, with the agreement and the written agreement of the applicant and the Scottish Government's Energy Consents Unit. So the proposed development, as described, comprises of 12 turbines, 6 with a height of up to 220 metres, 6 with a height of up to 200 metres, and it is situated approximately 1.3 kilometres northwest of the village of E and about 13 kilometres north of Dumfries. We've received no objections, subject to conditions from the internal consultees. So the council flood risk management team have requested conditions for the management of surface runoff. The archaeologist has requested a written scheme of investigation. The council's road team have no objection subject to traffic management plan, and the council's environmental health have requested a condition for noise emission levels. Okay, so the council's external landscape architect, that's Liz Bauman Landscape Architecture, whose advice forms part of this report and accompanies it. The final versions are available for the members. Recommends objection with conditions for landscape and lighting in case of approval. If you want to step forward with the slides, that would be great. So this is the site outline showing the access track. Step forward, please. This is the site layout with indications of where the turbines and the borrow pits and the internal access tracks will be placed. It's an indicative wind turbine. I'm sure members are familiar with these. Showing the scale. Okay, this is the visibility with landscape designations. So you can see the Moffat Hills scenic area, regional scenic area to the northeast. You've got the Thornhill uplands to the west, Solway Coast and Torthorwald and Turglaze Ridge RSAs to the south. There are no national landscape designations covering the site. The Forest of E, within which the turbine area is located, is commercial forestry with recreational facilities. There are also several waymarked walking routes and mountain bike trails nearby. Okay, so please step forward. So going forward, so this is based on the applicant's landscape and visual impact assessment, which was submitted as part of the application, showing the location of visual receptors such as dwellings, long distance footpaths and cumulative impacts for operational consented and proposed turbines nearby. The blue shaded areas show where 9 to 12 turbines would be visible at what distance. The landscape advice is that there would be significant day and night impacts at 4 of the viewpoints that have been indicated in the landscape and visual impact assessment. It is noted that the applicant has provided a rebuttal of the council's landscape advice. The members are reminded that the application will be determined by the Scottish ministers, and the decision before them today relates to whether the members wish to raise objections on a reasonable assessment of the advice provided to them by their consultees, in this case the landscape consultant. The members may wish to take further advice on this from the room. Okay, if we like to step forward again for the this is aircraft lighting. Again, the landscape consultant has raised concerns about aircraft lighting. These would be visible up to 20 kilometers away. All right, step forward, please. So these are the identified viewpoints that the landscape advice has indicated would be the most significant impacts. Again, both day and night. Other viewpoints would have significant day impacts. Right, step forward, please. So this is the viewpoint with a mock-up of the turbines in situ. This is viewpoint 1 near Burnfoot. Step forward. This is one of the viewpoints that the landscape consultant has raised concerns about. This is Loch Ettrick. This is considered to have significant day and night impacts on visually. Next, please. This is another viewpoint we have received concerns about. Next one. You can step through these. Again, this is another significant viewpoint with impacts. Near Mitchell's Slack. And again, this one with the south of E, with long distance view on the horizon. The turbines would be clearly visible on the horizon here. Next one. We can step forward through the rest of these that they haven't been raised as significant day and night impacts. This is the view from Closeburn, from Queensbury. So if I can just talk over these while these are going through, the landscape advice sets out 4 grounds for refusal. These reflect the severity of the landscape and visual effects which have been assessed to extend beyond that which would be acceptable. But I think there's about 4 more. So the grounds for refusal are the scale of the wind turbines and their elevated position would cause them to appear overly dominant in the Forest of E within 5 kilometres. The position and scale of the proposal located on the edge of the foothills would result in widespread visibility affecting large numbers of people in designated areas located in Nithsdale and Annandale, Mid-Nithsdale and the Lowther Hills at distances of up to 12 kilometres. The proposal would have a poor fit with the existing pattern of wind farms and the scale of the foothills. And there they are. These are the issues on the screen. And the 4th reason would be the proposed aviation lighting would cause significant visual intrusion within the E area, the Lowther Hills, Nithsdale and Annandale, and parts of Mid-Nithsdale at distances of up to 18 kilometres from the wind farm. So in summary, the scheme would have noted, while it's noted that the scheme would have benefits providing around 84 megawatts or 186 gigawatts of renewable energy annually, which equates to the annual power consumed by approximately 47,600 households. On the advice of the council's landscape consultant, the development has been found to have significant adverse impacts which would outweigh these benefits, and the on-balance recommendation therefore to the members is to raise objections to the proposal. And I commend my report to the members, and I'm here to address any questions that they may have. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Neil. Any questions for our case officer? Councillor Slater, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your report. Yes, there is significant view situations here, which they can be viewed from many different areas as well. And I can see why that there may be issues with that. Thank you.
Is that a
question? Microphone.
It is a question.
Addressed to me, Chair.
You switched yours off, Chair. No, it's still off.
Councillor Slater's about to pose a question to our case officer.
Yes, I just feel that there's silver airs here. The artists have said that there's at least 4 major areas which these turbines can be viewed from, and I believe that certainly has to be taken into consideration today. Thank you.
Neil?
Yes, that's the recommendation of that we have before us from the landscape officer. I think the members understood that correctly.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Maureen Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just see 4.5, page 131? MPF 4 sets out how the Scottish Government's approach to planning and development will achieve a net zero sustainable Scotland in 2045. Scotland at the moment already produces 70% of its energy, We only use about 40 to 43% of that energy. In 2024, 19.7 terawatts of power was transported, were exported to Europe, bringing in 1.5 billion to the economy. In 23, Scotland exported to England, Wales and Northern Ireland another 15.9 terawatts of power, 3.3 billion. My question is, why do we keep building more wind farms when we actually are able to, I know this one's going to produce 40 megawatts, but we are actually exporting power from Scotland when it states here the Scottish Government's approach for a sustainable Scotland. Could you answer that? Thank you.
It's maybe no for Neil that. I'll ask David to respond, but probably the answer is, if we want to make it financially viable, wind farm companies wouldn't come forward and try and build, because they're building on the basis they can sell the energy they build or they create with the construction of wind farms, and we're just a vehicle managing or trying to manage the construction in a way that's sympathetic to the wider landscape. But I'll ask Mr. Sutty to respond officially to you, Maureen.
Thank you.
There's probably a political dimension to that question, which I don't want to get dragged into, but we do have clear policy guidance from the Scottish Government in terms of National Planning Framework 4 and Policy 11 in particular, which sets out the issues that we have to use when considering applications. As Robert said earlier, we can't prevent applications coming in. We have to look at each one on its own merits. And as Neil has outlined in this particular case, we are recommending an objection because we consider that there are benefits to it, but it is outweighed, in the opinion of our external landscape consultant, that are outweighed by the negative impacts. So we cannot have a blanket view on this in planning terms. We have to look at every consultation we receive on its own merits.
And in this case, the recommendation is to refuse. So raise an objection, we can't refuse. Councillor Johnson, you want to come back?
Yes, thank you. And it's just a point there. It says, this means ensuring the right development happens in the right place. Thank you.
And that's what Neil's tried to achieve on this occasion. So, if Councillor Hislop.
Chair, it was a question on the aviation lighting. Within the report, it says that the lights have to be visible, but there's a saying that if we do put in an objection and it subsequently gets overturned, could infrared be an option? Is that a reasonable condition to put in if it has to be visible? Now, is that visible to the eye or visible to a receptor that can pick up infrared?
I will ask the case officer, but my understanding is after a certain height it's got to be a fixed invisible red light. But Neil, can you help Councillor Hislop? And if so, can we condition, in case the Scottish Government do overturn our objection, can we put conditions that we would want to include, that which would then be including infrared on this occasion?
Well, thank you for the question. Again, members might want to seek confirmation of this from inside the room. My understanding is that we can request the condition be applied if the Scottish ministers decide to overturn or disregard our objection, if that's the decision that the members wish to make today. My understanding, I'm not a technical expert, but my understanding is that the infrared lighting is visible to the airplanes, but not to the human eye. So that would be a mitigation of the lighting. Just a quick point as well. The landscape officer consultant had also requested a condition for landscaping as well. So
that's great.
There are those two options.
Thank you. And I think Robert has a bit of experience in infrared and aviation lighting. Can you just finish up this debate for enlighten, please, Robert?
Sure. My understanding at the moment is if you've got a wind farm and any part of the turbine is more than 150 metres from base to tip, you have to have visible aviation lighting to satisfy the safety requirements of the Civil Aviation Authority. anything less than 150 metres from base to tip, you can use infrared lighting for that. But in order to satisfy the Civil Aviation Authority, you have to have an element of visible lighting on these turbines. And as a committee, you've looked at this issue before, for example, in relation to the Scoop Hill case near Moffat. So that's certainly my understanding. So because of the nature of the proposed turbines at this location, you would be looking at the necessity for visible aviation lighting. There could obviously be infrared lighting in combination with that, but not instead of it. So, yeah, that's my understanding, Chair.
Thanks, Robert. That was my understanding, because I've asked the question already, because there's infrared, there's constant lighting in my ward, and I wondered why that was the case. But thanks, Neil. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, David. And thanks, Councillor Hislop. So, if there are no other questions, we'll move to determination. Councillor McFarlane.
Happy to go with the officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Dryborough.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you. If there are no alternative views, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please, Tracy?
Chair, members have agreed to raise an objection to the consultation as per the report. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Thanks, Neil. Move on to agenda item number 9. It's a consultation from Scottish Ministers regarding an application made under Section 36 of the Electricity Act 1989 for installation of a battery energy storage system and associated infrastructure with a generating capacity of up to 400 megawatts at proposed Lagree battery energy storage system near Lagree, Kirkconnell. This is a Section 36 consultation, reference number 25/1502/Section S36, and our case officer is Graham Smith. Graham, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Good afternoon. The first slide in the presentation shows the application site in its wider context. It's currently an area of forestry plantation to the east of the former Glenmuckloch open cast site, and the nearest settlement is Kirkconnell, which is in the bottom right-hand side of this satellite image. The development would utilise the existing access coming off the A76 serving Glenmuckloch. The next slide shows an overhead view of what's proposed, which is 2 large rectangular shaped compounds enclosed with security fencing, accommodating 252 containers and associated infrastructure. Councillors will note that a large swathe of the plantation will be removed to facilitate this development. What this slide doesn't effectively show, but I should highlight, is that the proposal includes mixed species woodland planting, hedgerow planting along the southern edge, a landscaped bund around the north-eastern periphery of the southern compound, and a habitat enhancement area to the north within the site, comprising of about 8.13 hectares of planting. The next slide shows another overhead plan, this one with an area hatched blue in adjoining land to the west, which councillors should note is the site of the northern compound of the Glenmuckloch to Glenglass reinforcement project, which was granted consent last year by the Scottish Government. So if you're looking at this development in isolation, you might think that it's a strange place for a proposal of this nature, but it's important to note that what is proposed here is part of a wider strategy and is described by the applicant as being an integral component of our future progression in energy supply. Next, there are some typical elevations showing the housing for the batteries. The dimensions of these are 2.6 metres in height, 12 metres in length and 2.4 metres in width, and they would have a typical appearance of a storage container. The next slide shows elevations for the proposed control building. This would be located within the lower compound and would be 6.5 metres in height, a footprint of 10 by 20 metres. Next gives councillors an idea of what will be enclosing the compounds. As you might expect, it's a security style fence, 3 metres in height with CCTV. Next slide gives you a view from the nearest residential property, Glenwharry Cottage, which is northeast of the site, approximately 310 metres away, with the development hatched red in the distance. If we can move on to the next one, you will see the view from the nearby heritage asset of St Connell's Churchyard, which is a scheduled monument, with the site in the distance again hatched red. The final slide, I would conclude that there will be a visual impact associated with this development. A cumulative impact is unavoidable in circumstances, as the landscape already contains a number of man-made features and remnants of an industrial legacy, and is set to contain additional grid infrastructure in the near future. With forestry set to be removed, it is a changing landscape context, albeit one that this development, while large in scale, would not be considered to have a significant impact on. The renewable energy benefits associated with what's proposed would, I believe, have a significant impact on our ability to harness fluctuations in wind energy supply and maximise the yield from the developments we have already facilitated through the planning process in the wider area. As per NPF 4, I would give that particular matter significant weight. You'll note in the report on page 237 of your papers that I'm recommending condition 13, securing a fire safety plan, to be approved by the Planning Authority prior to commencement. Since writing my report, I've looked into the only other BES development of a similar scale to this one in our area, which the committee will recall will be at the site in Gretna. The council did not recommend such a condition in their response for that development, and I've since learned that it's not practice of the Energy Consents Unit to include such a condition, as their belief is that fire response plans are not a planning matter, and the responsibility for this would lie with the Health and Safety Executive and Emergency Services. So if councillors go with my recommendation, it's obviously at their discretion what conditions they would wish to add, but that they should be aware that there is a likelihood that condition 13 wouldn't be brought forward. What I would add is that the information submitted in support of this application has demonstrated that safety has been an integral part of the design process, going right back to site selection. Councillors will note the remote nature of the site, far from any dwellings, with no hazards present, and an already established access serving Glenmuckloch. Furthermore, the applicant has confirmed their commitment to providing a fire response plan, which will be in place prior to construction. This is set out in the planning statement. As the technology evolves rapidly, as does associated fire risk best practice, so from a land use planning perspective, developments such as this should have sufficient flexibility to allow for storage of other types of batteries. The normal way the Energy Consents Unit would operate would be to add a standard condition that would secure final details prior to commencement. So the Planning Authority would be a consultee in that process, and that would normally be the time whereby we could run by whatever is proposed with colleagues in roads and the emergency services. So what I'm trying to say in respect of that is, now I have a bit more knowledge about the practice of Scottish ministers, I suspect that they will not add condition 13. They are more likely to add the standard condition that prior to commencement of development, finalised design details be submitted for approval. This includes storage technology, detailed layout, access and water supply for emergency services. In any event, I believe that the matter of fire risk will be dealt with in a responsible way and standardised manner, regardless of whether that condition is added, which we as a planning authority will still have some input into. So I hope this provides you with enough clarity in the position. As per my report, I'm recommending that the council do not object to this consultation subject to conditions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Graham. Any questions for our case officer? Councillor Hislop, followed by Councillor Campbell. Ivor, please.
I take it that if we leave condition 13 in to allow the consents department to determine it, it doesn't mean that we're actually objecting then if it's not included? If they don't include it,
No,
Graham?
No. Thank you for the question. It's their discretion whether to add that as a condition or not. They'll need to consider that against Circular 4/1998. So it may well be that they don't think that condition is necessary, as they have their own standardised condition which will secure details and allow us to consider and collaborate. So they may feel that it doesn't pass that part of the test as it's not necessary. They may also think it's not relevant to planning. So that it's a matter of opinion, I suppose, for the decision maker, but it's at their discretion. You know, you may have your own views on the tests and whether it's an appropriate condition in the circumstances.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Councillor Hasnott. Councillor John Campbell, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's about the scheduled monument at Old Connells Church. It's suitably mitigated by being fenced off. Would this development prevent access to that?
Graham?
No, the proposal doesn't involve fencing off the scheduled monument of St Connell's Church. It involves fencing off a smaller non-designated heritage feature within this part of the site that's not to be developed. So the mitigation for St Connell's Church is a landscaped bund which is running along the kind of northeastern periphery of the bottom compound. So that's going to be that would be maybe around about in the region of about 4 metres high with landscaping on top of it. So the mitigation's more a visual thing. Obviously in the early stages when the landscaping is planted and the construction, for example, the visual impact will be quite stark, but I think the expectation is, or the findings of the landscape consultant is that once that landscaping becomes established, it's going to act, you know, quite good. It's going to mitigate it quite well, I would say.
Thanks, Councillor Campbell. Any other questions for Graham? I've got one, Graham, and I'm presuming that Councillor Campbell's already touched on it. When you talk about scheduled monuments and the protection of certain elements, there is an individual small monument that locals refer to as St Connell's Cross, which is located on the Lagery Burn, which in itself is referred to as part of the archaeology of the area. And I presume that that will be identified and protected. It's not within the site, but it's in close proximity to the site. And I don't know whether we can condition or whether it's an expectation, but I would want to try and ensure that some access arrangement to St Connell's Cross remain for local walkers, because at one time it would be accessed from the landscape in the close proximity of the Glenmucklock site. And the only other thing's an observation and no a question. I'm delighted to see that we are making a financial requirement upon the company for restoration, because this whole site only became a development opportunity because it's an abandoned open cast site, and it is a scar on the landscape. And whilst in the early stages it might remain a scar on the landscape, at least it is something that will be doing positive for the community. It will create employment, and it will generate power or store power that's generated on the immediate environs of the area. So in that respect, I would certainly support the proposal as well. But just looking for some reassurance that the ancient monument, St Connell's Cross, will be protected in its own right. It's located in a very, very remote place of the hillside and limited access as it is, so I wouldn't want that blocked off. Thanks, Graham.
Thanks for the question. No, that it's not being proposed to enclose that. As part of the supporting information in the application, there was a full kind of archaeological assessment of the site and the wider area. And in 2.4 of the report, page 224 of your papers, you'll note that the council archaeologist was consulted as part of the application, and they've got no objections to what's proposed, so they don't have concerns. They've said that there's a small indirect effect on the setting of the scheduled monument Old Connell's Church, albeit they're agreeing that that's not significant, and the mitigation is secured via condition. So yeah, we've consulted the archaeologists. They're quite happy that what's proposed isn't going to have an adverse impact on, you know, the heritage assets in the area.
Yeah, and that's great. And just from local knowledge, because I lived in that area and I visited that area well as a young man, Old Connell's churches know what I'm talking about. This is a religious cross artefact located in the hillside, and apparently from it St Connell could see Kirkconnell, Sanquhar and Durrisdeer churches from that one location, and that's why there's a memorial there, but it's nothing to do with what we would call the Covenanters graveyard, which is Old Connell's church. But anyway, that's for another day. As long as somebody makes sure that that individual cross is secured and access is ensured, I'd be grateful for that. But if members are happy to go with the recommendation, Councillor Hislop.
Chair, no issue, but just, it's maybe belt and braces, or just so that I understand possibly the next step. It says here that we raised no objection, but within the conclusion at 424 it says subject to the appropriate conditions. Should that be in there, or does the way that it gets reported back to the reporter that those conditions that we would like to see are contained? Because if we raise no objection and that's the full stop, then we wouldn't be looking for conditions. But if we're looking for conditions, should be subject to conditions at the end of the sentence. Because
I'll ask Mr Sutty, but I'd be happy with that phraseology, Councillor Hislop.
Yes, Chair, it's certainly no objection, subject to the conditions that you've got in the appendix there. As Graham rightly alluded, the Energy Consent Unit on behalf of the Scottish Ministers tend to have a pro forma set of conditions that they will use. So whatever as long as we're asking for the right things, they will put that in their appropriate terminology. So, for example, we've got a condition recommended on fire safety, number 13, but from what Graham's saying, they will probably wish to attach their own version of that, and that would apply right through. But yes, definitely subject to conditions.
Councillor Hislop.
It's just if they decide that, oh well, we don't need a restoration fund in there, that might be one that I would want to see in there. It's just the wording of it. Does that raise no objection mean that our things go forward on their form, and these are the ones that we would want to see, and we would raise no objection with that? But if there's some of those missed out, would we then raise an objection?
A good question. I think it would be too late for that, Mr Sutty.
Yes, I mean, I take the point. If we'll be putting the appendix in the report, that will all go to the Scottish Ministers, and that will set out, this is the basis in which we've considered it. It's ultimately up to them to decide, but if we have real concerns, we have to say we are objecting, and that's what would trigger public inquiry. But clearly the recommendation here is that we're not objecting. We're not objecting subject to conditions, but ultimately the decision maker is not ourselves. So we're setting out our stall, but they have the power to say thanks, but we'll attach our own conditions.
The only problem is that doesn't solve Councillor Hislop's dilemma. If the Energy Consent Unit decides that we shouldn't have a financial bond, in the event that nobody there, we would object.
It is a fairly standard condition that they use, so I don't imagine it should be an issue, and it's clearly been flagged up why we'd be looking for that. So I don't anticipate them not attaching such a condition. It is one of their standard ones.
Thanks, David. Okay, we're happy to run with that. And Graham, I hope that, I don't want you to come back, but I hope that you do make reference to the St Connell's Cross in its entirety, given that it is a specific archaeological feature located in a very remote part of the valley on the Lagree Burn, or on the banks of the Lagree Burn. Thanks, Graham. Okay, Tracy, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please?
Thanks, Chair. Members have agreed to raise no objection to the consultation, subject to the conditions detailed in the report.
Thank you, Tracy. Members, move on to agenda item 10, an application for the erection of wind farm comprising of 10 wind turbines, each with an overall height from base to tip of up to 180 metres or 200 metres, formation of access tracks, 2 borrow pits, temporary construction compound, erection of substation, and formation of access and associated works at variance with condition 2 and 12 of planning permission 23/168/6 S42 to allow a change of the infrastructure layout, outwith the micrositing allowance and increased proposed wind turbine height for all wind turbines to a maximum tip height of 220 metres. Land at Glenshimmerach Hill and Kilnair Hill, St John's Town of the Rye, Castle Douglas. It's a section 42 application, reference 25/0958/S42. Recommendations to approve subject conditions, and case officer is Graham Smith. So Graham, again, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. The first slide shows the location of the site. It's enclosed by a faint red line leading from the B7000, which is running up the left-hand side of this ordnance plan. There's a clearer, more well-defined plan on page 239 of your papers. The access cuts across the southern upland way up to Glenshimmerach Hill and Kilnair. The site is about 6 kilometres northeast of St John's Town of Dalry, and it's an upland landscape context. It may well be familiar. As recently as the August committee meeting, this committee granted permission for some alterations to the previously consented wind farm that related to infrastructure and access tracks. So there is an extensive site history, which I've tried to lay out in my committee report on page 243 of your papers. This application solely seeks permission for a higher turbine type than was approved previously. And the next slide shows an elevation of what's proposed. The height they are seeking permission for is now 220 metres. That's an increase of 20 metres from what is currently consented. The next slide shows the most recently approved layout. The proposal has evolved over time through a series of amendments. There were originally 10 granted by Scottish ministers, 150 metres in height, and this most recent amendment seeks permission for 9 at 220. The next slide just shows landscape designations and also small dots which represent turbines either consented, constructed or applied for. So the significant impact which my report talks about on page 248 to 249 of your papers is restricted to the Strone designation, which is the brown area where the site is. So previous analysis of landscape impact of a wind farm at this location has found there to be substantial magnitude of change. However, the perceived benefits outweighed any concerns about landscape impact. The most recent landscape sensitivity guidance adopted by this council now recognises the landscape that this proposal sits within to be of a reduced sensitivity to a larger turbine type, such as what is proposed here. If we can move on to the next slide, councillors should note that there have been a range of these wireline comparisons from multiple angles submitted in an updated EIA, which has been sitting at Kirkbank House now, available for viewing while the application has been with us. I decided against including all of them in my presentation today, as I suspect they probably don't transfer too well on the screen. The top image in these two shows the consented layout in its wider context, which is a landscape where you can see multiple wind farms are evident. Some of them applied for, some consented, and some under construction. The turbines subject to this application are dark blue. It's probably hard to make out, but the bottom shows a proposed comparison of what's proposed here. The key thing to note between the two is that there is one fewer, but the turbines are slightly higher than previously approved. Some of the turbines have taken advantage of their micro-siting allowance, so may also be in slightly different positions. Moving on to the final slide, I would conclude that the higher turbine type would not result in a significant change to the visual impact of what's already consented. During the course of this application, on the advice of Nature Scot, the applicant updated their ecology information to take account of present-day habitat, which has been changing since the original EIA approximately 5 years ago, and also strengthened what's proposed in terms of biodiversity. There's a couple of additional measures that Nature Scott recommend we should secure, and therefore, in addition to the variation that the applicant is applying for, I'm also recommending a slight addition to the habitat management condition, which is number 18 on page 255 to 256 of your papers. I'm recommending that we secure a scheme for peatland restoration and improvement of habitat for ground nesting birds. So there's a further amendment which ensures we deliver a more robust ecological outcome in line with increasing emphasis of this in modern day planning policy. What is proposed overall in this amendment and the circumstances I've outlined is therefore considered to be acceptable, and I recommend that the variation be approved. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Graham. Any questions for our case officer? In that case, we're in session, members. Happy to agree. Councillor Dryborough?
I was just going to say that, Chair.
Thanks very much, Archie. Everybody's in agreement. Okay, so Tracy, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please?
Chair, members have agreed to approve the application subject to conditions in the report. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tracy. We're on to agenda item 11. An application for the erection of transport hub with roof-mounted photovoltaic panels incorporating provision of secure bicycle locker storage for bicycles, e-bikes, electric bicycles and ACC bikes, accessible electrical bikes or bicycles, bike wash, pump, repair station, public toilets, bus waiting areas, internal general purpose space and external shelter with fixed benching and installation of 5 bike stands and 4 electric vehicle charging units at Port Rodie Car Park, Port Rodie, Stranraer. It's a full application, reference number 25/1812/full. The recommendation is to approve subject to conditions, and although Iona Brooks listed on our papers, Rachel Lightfoot, good afternoon, or good afternoon, Rachel is going to take us through this presentation. So whenever you're ready, Rachel, thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors. You might recall that we had a couple of these the month before last. The application is before you today because it's been made by Dumfries and Galloway Council. Let's just quickly turn into the presentation. So the location of the works within the car park, the existing site plan, so you can see there the existing bus stop and toilet block. The proposed site plan, so you've got the transport hub further back into the car park. The toilet block has been demolished and that is now seen in planting area. The bus stop remains where it is with the bus stop unit provided in the transport hub. The hub elevations, the EV chargers which will go on to a number of existing car park. So this is just the view looking east and west. Towards the site you can just see the existing bus stop structure and the toilet block which will be demolished. The bus stop and toilet block. So just from within the site looking east, again you can see the toilet block to the left of the slide. Looking west and from within the site looking south. The EV chargers will go in this general area. So the key issues are that we align with local national policy in terms of improving sustainable transport, climate adaptation and placemaking. We've got no objections from any key consultees, and as you're aware, the recommendation is for approval. So no objections have been received for any consultee, and no comments have been made by any members of the public either. The application will provide enhanced community facilities and is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you.
Brief run through, Rachel. Thanks very much. Any questions for our case officer, David Slater? Councillor Slater, please.
Yes, thank you for your report. Yes, I must admit, anything that's good for the community and it drives the community forward and helps the community, I would certainly approve that. Thank you.
It's questions for the case officer now. Well, we'll get that and it's done, David. Councillor Hazlitt, please.
Does it tie in with the rail station at Stranraer as well? Because that would be beneficial, or is it further away? Because it's a transport hub, you would think they would try and get everything in together.
It might, that would depend how close the railway station is to the opportunity to develop a site. But Rachel, can you help? If no, I'll ask Mr. Sutton.
These are, so we've had the two before, so these are the attempts of the council on land that the council own, generally within car parks, to make those car park facilities where people are already parking their cars more sustainable, rather than linking in with existing rail infrastructure.
Content, Councillor Hazlitt? As content as you can be.
It would have made sense to have it tied in, but if there was some easier way to link, or if, as long as it doesn't affect the possibility of bringing the station back into the town centre, I think it's out in the sort of wild port or something.
Thank you. I'll ask Mr. Sutton just to add to that.
I'm happy to be corrected by any local knowledge, but my understanding is on page 267, the location plan, the station is actually up at the very top, centre top, on East Pier. So the reason why this is here is it's because the public bus route actually runs along in front, so it's actually, it makes more sense, but it is within easy walking distance of the railway station.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Rachel. So if there are no further questions, Councillor Slater has proposed we go with the recommendation. Councillor Andy McFarlane?
No, just happy to second.
Thank you. No other alternative views? In that case, Tracy, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please?
Mr. Chair, members have approved application subject to condition in the report. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Tracy. And members, thank you all for your presence today. I have no further business. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.